You look out your kitchen window on a Tuesday morning. The light hits the dew on the grass, catching the flash of feathers at the backyard feeder. A cardinal darts down, bright red, aggressive, pushing other birds aside. Then, another bird lands. It is duller. Its feathers are frayed around the edges like old velvet left too long in the sun. It moves with a strange, deliberate heaviness, stepping over twigs rather than bounding across them. The bright cardinal doesn't chase it away. Instead, the red bird pauses, drops its head, and steps back. You have seen this bird 100 times before. You have dismissed it as just another old, tired creature nearing the end of its short life. But beneath your very eyes, a silent hierarchy is unfolding, one that dictates who lives, who starves, and who remembers. You think you know your backyard. You do not know who is actually running it. Most people look at the wildlife in their yards through the lens of pure human utility. We see colors, we hear songs, and we measure life by seasons. We assume that birds operate purely on instinct-programmed little automata, flying from branch to branch, driven only by hunger and fear. But beneath that symbol veneer lies a complex, invisible society, governed by unwritten laws that have taken millions of years to forge. Most people do not realize that the oldest inhabitants of your yard, the frayed, slow-moving veterans you barely spare a glance, are not just surviving, they are governing. When a young blue jay arrives at your garden, frantic and brilliant blue, it thinks it owns the territory. It screams at the wind, chases sparrows, and gorges itself on your sunflower seeds with chaotic energy. Yet, just a few feet away, perched motionless on a low, shaded branch of the oak tree, an elder watches. This elder doesn't fly. It doesn't scream. It barely blinks. Yet every single bird in the canopy adjusts its behavior in response to that motionless silhouette. Why? Because in the avian world, youth is cheap, but age is an archive. We look at an old bird and see physical decline. We see cataracts, worn beaks, and faded colors. But nature sees something entirely different. Nature sees a living databank. Every drought, every harsh winter, every predator attack, and every poisoned patch of earth over the past decade is mapped inside that fragile skull. When you ignore the elderly birds in your yard, you aren't just ignoring aging animals. You are walking past the reigning monarchs of a hidden empire, and their loss spells quiet catastrophe for the entire local ecosystem. This matters because your backyard is not a random collection of creatures, it is a generational classroom. Every time an old bird quietly passes away without passing on its accumulated wisdom, an irreplaceable piece of local history vanishes forever. Imagine a human city where every library was burned down overnight, where the elders were erased and children were left to figure out agriculture, medicine, and survival entirely from scratch. That is what happens in your hedgerow every single time an old sentinel dies unheeded. By the end of this journey, you will never look at a frayed feather or a slow-blinking eye the same way again. You will start to see the profound, unspoken drama playing out right outside your window, a drama of culture, sacrifice, and the heavy burden of keeping a lineage alive. If you have ever stared out your window and wondered what stories are hidden in the trees, take a moment right now to hit that subscribe button. Join us as we look past the surface of nature and uncover the secret mechanics running right beneath our feet. Let us step into the hidden world of the garden elders. To understand the secret elders of your yard, you have to look past the frantic energy of the feeders. The true power structure of an avian community is entirely divorced from physical strength or brilliant plumage. In the human world, we often conflate youth and vigor with leadership. In the backyard, leadership belongs strictly to the survivors. Picture a typical suburban backyard. There's a bird bath, a dense boxwood hedge, a patch of clover, and a wooden fence worn silver by weather. To you, it is a landscape of relaxation. To the local flock, it is a battleground of scarce resources. Every square foot is mapped, claimed, and defended. At the top of this hierarchy sits what ornithologists call the senior class birds that have survived multiple seasons of hawks, domestic cats, hard freezes, and pesticide exposure. These birds are easy to spot if you know what to look for. Their movements are characterized by an economy of motion. While a juvenile titmouse flits 50 times a minute, exhausting its metabolic reserves, the senior titmouse sits. It calculates, it observes. When a senior bird lands on a branch, notice how the surrounding birds reposition themselves. There is no aggressive combat, no loud scolding. There is an immediate, almost respectful yielding of space. This is not driven by fear of physical attack. Old birds are often physically weaker, plagued by arthritic joints and worn talons. Instead, it is driven by a deep, ancient social deference to status earned through survival. Think about the sensory experience of this invisible class. The sound of an old bird's call is different. It carries a deeper, raspier timbre, stripped of the shrill panic of youth. The motion is smooth, deliberate, and remarkably still. In a world where everything is constantly darting, rushing, and fleeing, stillness is a form of gravity. The senior birds anchor the flock. Without them, a local population of birds doesn't just lose numbers, it loses its center of gravity, dissolving into a nervous, uncoordinated mob of frantic flyers. Inside the brain of a backyard veteran lies something science is only beginning to fully appreciate: an ancient memory vault. A young bird knows how to fly, how to beg, and how to crack a seed. That is factory-installed software. But it does not know where the water stays when a 4-year drought strikes. It does not know which side of the garden fence the neighborhood cat patrols during the twilight hours of autumn. It does not know which berries are sweet and which will quietly poison the nervous system. All of that data must be learned. And in the animal kingdom, learning is paid for in blood and survival. Consider a harsh winter frost. To a bird hatched last spring, a sudden drop in temperature and a thick blanket of snow is an apocalyptic event. It panics. It burns through its precious fat reserves within hours, frantically searching frozen ground for food that no longer exists. But the 10-year-old mockingbird sitting silently in the dense center of your pine tree has seen this exact weather pattern 4 times before. While the young birds flutter themselves to exhaustion, the elder simply shifts its roosting spot to the lee side of the chimney brick, where residual heat from your house warms the masonry by a fraction of a degree. It taps into a food cache it buried 3 weeks ago in the rotting stump under the hydrangeas, a cache it remembers with photographic precision, despite the snow cover. This is the hidden value of the memory vault. The old bird does not need to guess, it remembers. The visual texture of its environment is completely different from yours or a youngster's. To you, the yard is a green lawn and some bushes. To the veteran, the yard is a complex 3-dimensional grid of thermal traps, predator blind spots, historical food sources, and microclimates. When you watch an old bird sit motionless on a branch for 20 minutes, it is not resting out of weakness. It is running simulations, cross-referencing decades of environmental data against the wind direction and the angle of the sun. It is the living archive of your patch of earth. We often think of animal behavior as instinctual and unchanging, but advanced field studies reveal a startling reality. Birds have culture, and culture requires transmission. When young fledglings leave the nest, they are clumsy, loud, and profoundly clueless. Left entirely to their own devices, naive young birds make fatal errors within days. They land too close to sliding glass doors, they mob hawks that are too large to deter, and they gorge themselves on toxic ornamental berries planted by well-meaning homeowners. This is where the senior class steps into its most critical role: flock mentorship. Watch a family of cardinals in late summer. Notice how the parents are often assisted by older, non-breeding birds, often previous offspring or unrelated elders that have integrated into the local social loop. These elders do not just tolerate the young, they actively police and school them. If a young bird flies toward a known danger zone, say, the corner of the yard where the neighborhood cat likes to crouch behind the hostas, the elder will emit a sharp, low-frequency warning chirr. It is a specific sound, completely different from the screech used for an aerial hawk. It is the social reprimand sound. The fledgling freezes, turns, and corrects its trajectory. This is where generational knowledge bridges the gap between life and death. The elders pass down silent maps of safety. They teach the young where the foraging boundaries lie, how to distinguish between a harmless garden snake and an ambush predator, and how to navigate the complex social politics of the multi-species feeder. Without this mentorship, young birds display staggering rates of mortality during their first migration or their first winter. The elders act as cultural anchors, absorbing the shock of environmental change and translating it into actionable survival lessons for the next generation. What happens when we disrupt this ancient system? What occurs when a local ecosystem loses its senior class? Consider what happens when habitat fragmentation, localized pesticide use, or domestic cat predation systematically wipes out the older, wiser individuals in a suburban neighborhood. On the surface, the yard might still look busy. New birds arrive every spring, filling the vacuum with bright colors and cheerful songs. But beneath that deceptive appearance, a quiet cultural collapse is underway. Without elders to guide them, the incoming generations of birds become erratic. Flock cohesion breaks down. Instead of moving through the yard with synchronized, strategic awareness, young birds scatter haphazardly. They strike windows with alarming frequency, because no older bird has taught them to recognize the treacherous illusion of glass-reflecting sky. They exhaust their energy fighting over low-value food sources while ignoring high-energy natural seeds hidden in plain sight. Worse still, the community loses its collective memory of danger. When a Cooper's hawk sweeps through a yard with a healthy senior population, the elders sound a specialized, highly specific alarm that instantly drops every bird in the vicinity into absolute, motionless camouflage. But in an ecosystem where the elders have been wiped out, the young birds react with chaotic, uncoordinated panic flashing into motion, catching the predator's eye and suffering devastating losses. The cost of losing weathered feathers is steep. It strips the local wildlife of its institutional knowledge. A yard without old birds is like a ship at sea, with a crew of enthusiastic children and no captain. They might enjoy the voyage for a little while, but the first hidden reef they encounter will tear them apart. Decoding the Cuit observers. If you want to witness this hidden world firsthand, you have to change how you look at the quiet observers in your yard. Stop looking for the flashiest colors and start looking for the stillness. Go out to your porch tomorrow morning and spend 5 minutes watching the edges of your property, not the center where the feeder is, but the deep shadows under the shrubs, the high dead branches of the old maple, the gnarled crooks of the fence line. Look for the birds that are not eating. Look for the ones that are watching the others eat. Notice their physical markers. Their feathers will often look matte, slightly ruffled, or uneven. Their beaks might show tiny chips or a slightly blunted tip from years of cracking hard shells and digging in packed earth. Their eyes will possess a steady, unblinking clarity that feels almost unnerving if you lock gaze with them for more than a second. Listen to the ambient soundscape. Beneath the loud chatterbox squabbles of the blue jays and the frantic twittering of the house finches, listen for the low, rhythmic pulses of the elders. They are the metronome of the garden. When a sudden gust of wind moves through the trees, watch how the younger birds react with sudden, jittery adjustments, while the old bird simply tilts its head a fraction of an inch, reading the barometric pressure shift before it even reaches the ground. You are standing in the middle of a sophisticated, multi-layered society. The old birds in your yard are not dying out of your concern. They are reigning from the shadows, holding the fragile threads of their local culture together through sheer grit, memory, and silent vigilance. Be you, built you, pat. And yet, as you stand there watching them, a deeper, more unsettling realization begins to take hold. This isn't just about birds. It is a reflection of a universal law that runs through every layer of the natural world, a law we spend our entire modern lives trying to escape, but which governs every living cell on this planet. We live in a culture that worships youth, speed, novelty, and endless expansion. We throw away what is old, fraying, and slow. We pave over the ancient groves, we replace the veterans, and we celebrate the new arrivals. But nature tells a completely different story. Nature knows that raw energy without wisdom is just self-destruction. Think about the sheer impossibility of what these elderly birds have achieved. Every single day of their lives has been a high-stakes gamble against starvation, infection, gravity, and claws. To reach old age as a wild bird is a statistical miracle. It means cheating death thousands of times over, morning after morning, through pure intelligence, adaptability, and restraint. When you look at that old, frayed bird on your fence post, You are looking at something that has outlived countless predators, survived catastrophic storms, and watched generations of its own family vanish into the wind. It is an unbroken chain stretching backward into deep time. And if you break that chain, if you ignore them, dismiss them, or let their habitats crumble, you aren't just losing backyard wildlife. You are severing the living memory of the earth itself. And then you notice something extraordinary. You look back at the feeder. The frantic young cardinal is still there, dominating the perches, throwing seed hulls everywhere in a dazzling display of youthful arrogance. But suddenly, a shadow cuts across the lawn. A sharp-shinned hawk drops from the upper canopy like a falling knife, silent and lethal, aiming straight for the feeder. The young cardinal freezes, caught mid-motion, paralyzed by panic. It is a fraction of a second away from a fatal mistake. And then, from the dark, heavy shadows of the old boxwood hedge, the veteran moves. It doesn't fly toward the feeder. It doesn't scream. Instead, with one precise, explosive burst of energy, the old, frayed bird launches itself directly into the path of the incoming hawk, not to fight it, but to trigger a pre-programmed distraction the sacrificial maneuver honed over a decade of narrow escapes. The hawk's momentum is disrupted by a split second. The young cardinal, jolted out of its paralysis by the veteran's flash of motion, snaps its wings open and dives deep into the thick, protective briars of the hedge. The hawk pulls up empty-taloned, flashing its angry yellow eyes before banking up into the clouds. Silence descends on the yard. Slowly, out of the dense center of the brush, the old bird steps back onto an open branch. Its feathers are ruffled even more than before. Its breathing is heavy, rattling slightly in the cool morning air. It is battered, exhausted, and bleeding a single drop of red from a grazed wingtip. It looks directly at you through the kitchen window. It did not save the young bird out of blind instinct. It saved the future. Because it knows with the cold, absolute clarity of an elder that the flock cannot survive the winter without tomorrow. And in that quiet moment, the entire hierarchy of your backyard is laid bare. The young provide the energy, but the old provide the eternity. You look down at your kitchen windowsill. The dew on the grass has dried in the midday sun. The backyard looks peaceful again, just grass, trees, and wind. But the illusion of a simple, mindless landscape is gone forever. You look out at the fence line. The frayed, weathered veteran is still sitting there on its branch, quietly preening its injured wing, watching over the green world it has guarded for so many years. You realize that your yard is not just a place where animals happen to live. It is a living, breathing kingdom with its own history, its own elders, and its own silent wars. The next time you see an old bird resting quietly in your yard, you won't walk past it. You will see the vault of memory, the anchor of culture, and the beating heart of the wild right outside your window. What is the oldest, wisest animal you have ever noticed watching you from your yard? Drop your story in the comments below, and let's uncover the hidden history of your neighborhood together.